March 13th, Friday the 13th, to order. The chair, Lisa Ridge, is not here today, so I will be chairing this meeting. We will introduce ourselves, and please, if you're a proxy, would you please indicate for whom you are a proxy? Can we start with you, Matt?
Matt 30, Bloomington Common Council.
Pamela Samples, Ellisville Town Council.
Terry Porter, Director of Planning and Transportation, proxy for Mayor Hamilton.
Sarah Reiterban, MPO Citizens Advisory Committee.
Chris Woolman, NDOT, proxy for Tony McClellan.
City Bloomington Public Works, proxy for Director Unanimously.
Jason Van Hayden.
Kent McMahon from Bloomington Transit. I've been to London the weather, so I thought you feel more comfortable.
Good plan.
Thank you. Okay. First order of business is approval of the minutes from February the 14th, 2020. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as read?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Thank you. All those in favor of approving the minutes from February the 14th, 2020, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Since the chair isn't here, we'll skip the communication from the chair. Report from officers and or committees. I will give the report on the Citizens Advisory Committee, which did meet in February on the 26th. They looked at first the draft 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is our new long-range transportation plan in the works. And what we're looking at is our dividing up the work on this into smaller portions and dividing it among the members of the CAC so that we can give it a more in-depth look and help the staff to draft the new LRTP or MTP. We also looked at the draft of the bylaws, and we approved it with an amendment that deleted section 3.3 to A22, which is, ooh, you turned up the volume. How exciting. Okay. So to delete the section that says non-voting next to CAC member, and with that amendment, they passed or recommended approval of the bylaws. That's it for the CAC. We also approved the new business, which was the TIP amendments, and we recommended that the draft have fiscal year 2021-2022 UPWP be recommended to the policy committee. That's it.
Lou May, General Manager at Bloomington Transit. I also serve as chair of the Technical Advisory Committee for the MPO. At our last TAC meeting, the TAC voted 9-2 to recommend approval of to the policy committee of the proposed bylaw changes. And then also the TAC voted unanimously to recommend to the policy committee approval of the 2021-2022 Unified Planning Work Program. And then lastly, the TAC voted unanimously to recommend to the policy committee approval of the 3 TIP amendments from NDOT.
Thank you. Okay, reports from the MPO staff.
First of all, thank you all for being here today under fast-moving circumstances. We've rolled out 3 new chapters of the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This one, the first one here, Chapter 2, this is the guiding principles. This is the very heart of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And when we shared this with the Citizens Advisory Committee and Technical Advisory Committee a few weeks ago, we asked that everybody take this home with them and look at it for at least a month, month and a half, perhaps 2 months, because we want you to truly consider if there are any changes that are needed, and if changes are needed, what should those changes include? Now, as a key to you, we have several things missing from the vision, goals, objectives in here that were not in the previous the current 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Things such as sustainability, climate change, micromobility, freight, and a number of other things in that same vein are not in here. Oh, Vision Zero, that's another one, another big one. So that we ask you to take this home with you. Everybody's going to be home. Take this home with you and review these closely and come back to us in a month or maybe 2 months. We want to keep this discussion open and until at least May or June to make sure that we're covering all of the areas that there's an interest for from a policy perspective, and also what is technically feasible. With that introduction, I mean, the text here is essentially the same as the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, with the exception of we moved safety up to the top priority. Going to the next chapter and/or appendices, transportation planning requirements. Under the current legislation, Fixing America's Surface Transportation FAST Act, there are a number of planning requirements. These are, I would call these brand new. This is almost a brand new chapter in terms of the text. It's written from scratch, these are the key planning factors are all there in, that's maroon, by the way, in a maroon color. And then the bullet points are under those on how we shall address all of those individual planning factors. And again, we ask that you take this with you, look at it closely. This has already been reviewed by the TAC and the CEC, but we're not asking them for any feedback on it for another month or two. The next chapter or appendices is performance measures under the FAST Act again. This is a brand new set of criteria. Congress established performance measures, and these performance measures are for states and MPOs. Each individual state has to adopt what are called targets, and that's in the legislation. The word targets is in the legislation. And then you have to talk about how you're going to achieve those targets and when you're going to achieve those targets. Now, the performance goals cover safety, infrastructure, congestion, system reliability, freight, which is something we've never done here in this MPO, environmental sustainability, and reduce project delivery delays. Now, the text that follows after this, performance measures, this committee actually adopted nearly 2 years ago in some areas, and what we did was we plugged it right in and identified things like percents of pavements in good condition, bridge conditions, travel time and reliability, and all of these performance measures that are in here that are shown as percentages. These are Indiana Department of Transportation's goals or targets. And then we, as the MPO Policy Committee and the staff, agreed to, instead of developing other measures, we agreed to the targets established by the state. Now, the one that we changed just recently was in terms of safety. I'm not going to scroll back up to it. Safety, we just updated that a few meetings ago. All of the other criteria may change come in April or May. The Department of Transportation has alerted us that some of the 2021 goals are going to be moved out to 2023, and then we'll also have what I would call a return feedback on how did the state achieve its goals. Did it achieve them or not? If they didn't achieve them, what measures are they taking to achieve those goals and the new ones right now? And that's it. One thing in here, in terms of congestion mitigation and air quality, those targets we don't have to worry about. Those are statewide targets. Since Bloomington is an attainment area for air quality, those we don't have to worry about. Transit performance measures, these are the benchmarks for transit performance. We've gotten no additional guidance from the Department of Transportation Public Transit Division on these whatsoever. Now, from the current 2040 transportation plan, the MPO had performance measures, and these are the performance measures that are in here and aggregate statistics. And I would characterize these as raw, somewhat undeveloped. This is what the staff will be working with all of the committees and all the citizens on over the course of the next 3 to 4 months to refine this down so that way it's much more measurable in terms of what do we want to measure, travel demand, efficiency, economic, safety, and environmental, but how are we going to measure our success and our achievements? And then there were urban design variables that were also placed in the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. I think the origin of those was probably 2013. The question is, do we wish to retain those, or do we wish to expand upon those, or refine them, or whatever? Don't know. Anyway, these are out here for your consideration. Like I said, we'll be coming back in subsequent months to refine this entire process. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
These draft chapters are 3 of the 5 additional chapters that I'm just wondering, I know there was going to be a chapter on equity and one on environmental sustainability. Was that not going to be?
Those will be included in future transportation needs chapter.
But it's in this document that those chapters are going to go.
Not what you have before you right now, but it will be, yes.
Right. That it's coming. It's
we
forthcoming.
have 2 additional chapters. As I say, we're rolling out electronically. Next week, they're written, but we wanted to be sure on those. We'll put those out there in draft form, and then we'll be asking, and the staff isn't giving you language on health and equity and Vision Zero or anything like that. We're rolling out the chapter, and then what we want it to be what I would call an evolutionary process where it comes from the Citizens Advisory Committee, the Technical Advisory Committee, and then the Policy Committee over multiple periods of months and weeks to finally achieve some sort of a consensus. What our target is achieving a consensus on the chapters by the end of June of this year, so that way in July, when we don't meet, the staff will be refining the document, and then in August, we will come out with what I would call a 95% complete draft that we will circulate at public meetings, circulate to all of the committees, and then in September, we'll be asking the Technical and the Citizens Advisory Committee to approve what I would call a final draft document, and then the target is also for the Policy Committee to adopt a final document in October, the first 2 weeks of October. Now, we have a fallback month of November, if that's necessary, and worst case scenario, not knowing how things are evolving right now, December. But we have until December 31st to complete this 2045 draft plan. the way the chapters have been working out thus far, we're on schedule. In fact, we're slightly ahead of schedule. I'm pleased with that. The public involvement process, we don't know right now because of the way the situation is evolving nationally.
So I appreciate the timeline, reminding me of the timeline. And so December 31st is the deadline for submission of the document?
Well, that would be the the absolute deadline, yes, but we intend to have it in by no later than December 1st because
It's been established?
simply because there's a review time. You have to allow review time by the Indiana Department of Transportation, the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, and submitting a document for review in December of any year is somewhat dicey.
Right. And that's what I'm trying to get at too. So at that point, with December being the absolute deadline, is that still a draft document that goes forward to Federal Highway?
No, it would be a final document.
Okay.
And we will be submitting what I would call 95 and 99% drafts. We'll be submitting those to Federal Highway Administration and NDOT as we go. In fact, they're on the mailing list for all of these chapters. So Federal Highway Administration, as we roll these out, as we have been for the last 3 months, January, started in January, as we roll these out, they're reviewing these in real time, so that way it cuts the review process. Now, what the pieces of Humpty Dumpty look like when we put them all back together again, that's what we're looking for, is do the parts add up to the whole? And they should. I mean, the way we've written it, it should. But in answer to your question, yes, it's a rolling review process.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that overview. And two questions. One, do I understand correctly that most of the performance measures in Appendix B are, those measures themselves are, that bulleted lists come from the Indiana Department of Transportation's targets that they've established for various things, the on-road mobile source emission targets and freight and the rest. So we're just taking those measures kind of as handed to us by the state?
Correct.
Okay. And the follow-up then is that it seems like, well, the transit measures are specified to come from Bloomington Transit, but then the final section below that, the BMC, MPO performance measures, would it be, am I understanding it correctly that that's sort of the bulk of our MPO's assignment in terms of crafting a set of performance measures that are in line with our vision and goals, and this is kind of really where a lot of the work needs to be done to really, like, this needs to be built out quite a lot to establish.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yes. I call this raw.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be brutally honest here. And this was placed in the final hour of the 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan adoption 2 years ago, year and a half ago, 2 years ago. This was placed in at the final hour because Federal Highway Administration, and there's a typo right there. Federal Highway Administration said, you shall put these in, so we did. But they're just there. They need fleshing out, dramatically fleshing out.
We think all of these bullet points will have some sort of quantitative measure.
Hopefully.
That's the goal. Okay.
Hopefully. And then there are some things that may be missing here too, such as the health and equity, such as Vision Zero, such as climate change, such as. Yeah, I mean, the list is about 7 different items that are missing right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Two questions. One, I understand that the uncertainty of the times and that we've had to modify public participation. Are we looking at ways of creating public participation in this early draft phase that is not on site, so that the public will have a way of interacting with the documents that are being rolled out? That's one question. And the second is kind of a comment of in answer to Matt, and I just want clarification. I would assume that the only thing we're not, while we are looking at performance measures, there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of visioning future transportation needs and possibilities. And as I recall from our CAC meeting, the languaging within this document, as well as looking at just the bigger pictures and looking at our guiding principles and what is missing in terms of guiding principles that matter to this community in particular. So I don't think it's limited to performance measures.
No, I mean, we have a chapter on future transportation needs, but in the performance measures here, I mean, what the big stuff up at the top, I'll call it, that came from the Indiana Department of Transportation. We had the option of adopting our own, but we would have to mathematically prove that or statistically prove that, and that's a daunting task for two people. So we elected, and all of the MPOs in Indiana elected to go with the Indiana Department of Transportation's targets. Where we have flexibility is in our own performance measures, which down here at the very end of the chapter. And that's where we can set our own course on what's important to us. What do we want to achieve and how do we want to achieve it? And then what are the measures of how do we measure success? Does that answer your question? And then in terms of...
And to answer your first question, we do have an online public commenting forum for the Metropolitan Transportation Plan on our MPO website. It's open now, and it will be open for or until this is passed and later in the year. As of right now, we don't have any plans to reschedule our public meetings that are currently set for April 1st at the Bloomington Transit Center from noon to 2, and also from April 1st at the Ellettsville Town Hall from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And then on April 2nd at Switchyard Brewing Company's boardroom from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock. As of right now, those public meetings are going to be held until further notice, which may come sooner than later. And we also have public meetings scheduled as far in advance as far in the future rather as in August. Yes. Hopefully we'll be able to have those definitely in person.
And September.
And September too. So with regard to those upcoming public meetings, we'll be sure to keep everybody in the loop on that.
That was essentially my question is, just if you could send a reminder actually of all those public meetings as well as the online forum, perhaps the MPO Policy Committee can help to circulate and highlight those. Certainly I can get most of the Bloomington City Council to send that out via their networks, constituent lists, Facebook, et cetera, and try to really elevate that opportunity for members of the public.
Oh, absolutely. The more traction on that, the better.
Thank you.
In addition to that, we're exploring virtual town hall meetings. I mean, the way we have it right now, we're looking at 9 to 11 meetings, public meetings, which is vastly in excess of what we would normally do. But if we hold virtual town meetings, that'll be another avenue to explore. Okay.
Thank you. And anyone else on the MTP? Okay. Moving on. Any other report from staff? Okay. You want to tell us about road school?
I did just attend road school from Tuesday to Wednesday at Purdue, and it was a very valuable experience, and I'd be happy to share more with you in the future.
Okay. Moving on to old business. The BMC MPO operational bylaws.
So I just have one clarification going back to the public hearings. Sure. So I'm understanding you saying, Ryan, that the public, you're still looking at the public hearings, just that the Technical Advisory Committee and the CAC committee meetings, those have been canceled.
Yes, that is correct. That's what we've done thus far.
Okay. Got you. Just wanted to be clear.
And those are the 2 meetings at the end of this month. And then we may hold those meetings in virtual. We may hold virtual meetings.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Now we'll move on to the operational bylaws.
The need for amending the operational bylaws kind of spawned all the way back to last spring in May and June, primarily because this document has not been updated since 2009. So the MPO committees as well as the staff agreed that it was the appropriate time to look into that. So in October, we formed what we call the Bylaws Working Group. And this working group had 5 members from the Policy Committee, each representing their LPA. So there were not multiple LPA representatives on the working group. There were also 1 member from the TAC and 1 member from the CAC, as well as the county attorney and City of Bloomington attorney. So we had meetings in October and November to hatch out what the working group thought was appropriate to update within this document. And there were several things. Within the last 3 months, the bylaws have been in, probably the last 4 or 5 months, the bylaws have been in the packet probably at least four times. So I'm not going to go through step by step the entire bylaws unless you have questions about certain things. In January, the working group unanimously passed the draft bylaws, and then subsequently in January, the TAC and CAC opened up a 30-day public comment period, and we were taking comments up until this morning. From the comments that were received, we got 5 comments from CAC members, mainly about opposing the CAC's voting status on the TAC being changed to non-voting. We also received 8 other comments supporting the removal of CAC voting status due to the non-technical nature of the CAC. Most still supported the membership on the TAC though, and those who support removing the CAC voting status on the TAC still applaud that our CAC is the only CAC that has membership on a TAC or policy committee in the state of Indiana. Additionally, comments praised the increased focus on public commenting and public comment periods at all MPO meetings. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Do I understand you to say that there is no one except for CAC members who spoke against the non-voting status?
This is correct.
Are you telling me that Julie Thomas is supposedly a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee? Because I know that she sent me a copy of an email.
Oh, so I guess I was wrong there. There were 6 comments then.
So you're talking about public comments.
Oh, but in addition,
Yes.
to said a response by Julie Thomas, she was given wrong information about CAC membership. She was confused that the CAC representative was going to be removed from the policy committee. So I informed her that that was indeed incorrect and that nobody wanted that.
Matt?
And I understand correctly then that, or do I understand correctly that the working group voted unanimously in favor of the bylaws?
This is correct.
Since I was on the working group, and I know I did not vote for it, I'm surprised that it was unanimous.
There was an email and a poll sent out, and nobody rejected it from the working group, and everyone that I did get responses from were for the bylaws as is. So this
is
may
it
have been an oversight.
I'm sorry. Were there abstentions essentially then if there were non-responses? Is that how we should interpret that? I'm not quite sure how the working group was set up or if it was conducted, online, this response, or in person.
As far as I know, there were no abstentions because I didn't hear from a few people. Then that may have been interpreted as an abstention then perhaps.
Sure, Lou. I'm sorry.
Explain some of the things that were discussed at the working group. I was a participant and I did not respond in writing, but I did express my belief that those meetings, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
I did express myself at those meetings that when this original proposal to put the CAC on the policy committee was proposed, I think it was roughly 14 years ago, I was opposed to it. The chairman in those days was Jack Baker, who had enormous respect for me, and I had enormous respect for Sarah as well. One of the arguments I heard about the CAC's participation in the TAC was that they're not technical in nature, so they shouldn't be on the TAC. They already have their own advisory committee. In those days when this was first proposed, I said, well, the CAC is not a policy-making committee either, so they shouldn't be on the policy committee. I don't have a problem with Sarah, and I'm not going to propose that we remove them now. I think we passed that bridge a long time ago. But I did just want to clarify that I did raise my concerns about that at the meeting, and it didn't go anywhere, so I have not pursued it. But just for the record, that's how I am.
Okay. Yeah, and just to note, no one is in favor of eliminating the CAC, and no one is in favor of, or everyone is in favor of keeping a CAC member on the policy committee and the technical advisory committee.
So if I understand you correctly, CAC should participate in technical issues but not vote on them, although it would be only one of 25 votes.
This is what the draft is currently saying, yes.
Yes, Matt?
So I read through I'll get to a question here, but a little bit background first. Looking at the bylaws, the responsibilities of the TAC and the CAC respectively. The TAC, among other things, is meant to recommend technical methods, procedures, and standards to help coordinate the work of operating departments and agencies participating in the planning process. And then the responsibilities of the CAC include to keep the policy committee, TAC, and Mpo staff apprised of current and emerging citizen concerns in relation to transportation issues. So just to my plain reading of that, I think the responsibilities as listed for the CAC, there's a good argument to be made there for CAC membership on the TAC in order to help liaise essentially between those committees that help keep them apprised, as is their responsibility. But I can certainly see the argument for non-voting status simply based on the responsibilities of the TAC and how they are meant to recommend technical methods and procedures and coordinate the work of operating departments and agencies, neither of which are CAC capacities, really. So I guess my question is, given that context and the responsibilities as outlined in the bylaws of each committee, were there arguments put forth by CAC members in public comment or during the bylaws working group discussions? Were there arguments put forth to explain why a CAC member on the TAC should have voting right or voting privileges for a technical body? Like, was there an argument made that notwithstanding the lack of technical expertise, they should have a vote for this reason, or that the CAC has technical expertise? Like, what were the arguments in relation to that, I guess, is my question, if you can recall, or if there's a relevant answer.
A while ago, really one of the main arguments was that the TAC is so large. What is, taking one vote away from the TAC? That was the largest one. Let's see.
Or I guess to this point too, I'd invite response from the chair or whomever else was present in those meetings. If there was my question essentially is, what is the counter argument to the argument put forth by, I think, the working group, or many on the working group and the TAC, that the CAC is not a technical body and therefore should not be voting on a technical committee? What is the counter argument to that is my question. And if someone else has specific knowledge, I would welcome that from, I'll defer to the chair to invite.
We have a member from the TAC here,
Jane,
so.
you want to introduce yourself?
I am a member of the Technical Advisory Committee. I was actually the appointed representative for this working group. Attended all the meetings, responded to all of the emails. I can tell you that part of the argument is that the Citizens Advisory Committee has a voting status on the Policy Committee. So their representation on these matters is very well heard and very well represented. The Technical Advisory Committee, as we've stated, is a technical committee. We're not saying that the CAC should not be at the table, but the recommendation of this working group was that it be a non-voting position.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if that helps.
Anyone else? Then I'll just share that the position from the members of the CAC is that when it's regressive to remove voting privileges, when they were granted probably I think that Kent is right, it's about 14 years ago. I know it's more than 10. And that the citizens' position is representing all of the public and their technical concerns about projects, not just a particular bailiwick. Each one of the representatives, the other representatives, represents a particular silo of information and or interest. And the experience is that while all of them may be citizens, and we assume they are, the interests of the citizens are not what is their major position or interest in that body. So I would say that that's the major concern, is that citizens' positions, even on technical matters, and I was told that citizens can't possibly have technical information or knowledge, is considered a bit sad and disappointing, because particularly in this community, we value the input of citizens and their voices, and to remove a voting membership says to citizens in general that their voice doesn't really matter, particularly when it's only one of 25 voices. It seems a bit banal. Does that help?
Thank you for your perspective. Thanks.
Anyone else to speak to the draft proposal?
Yes, I just wanted to state that I do agree with the working group's position and their proposal that they've submitted, that the Citizen Advisory Council does have a voice. The Citizen Advisory Council has their own committee. They have a voting member on the policy committee. I serve on the USB board as ex officio. I do not have a vote, but I serve on that board. It's not a slight or an intended slight. And I don't question what this working group has worked hard to put together, and I don't agree with the argument that this is going to give the public less of a voice. And if we're ready to entertain a motion, I would be happy to make one.
Well, there's one other thing that I would like to raise, and that is that one of the considered deficits on the Technical Advisory Committee, and once again, we can say that they have no technical expertise and shouldn't be there, is a member of the accessibility community. And while our engineers address the ADA compliance issues, they are not necessarily looking at disability issues. And without someone from the disability community playing a role at the TAC, I think that we have a serious hole. Matt?
Yeah, I am curious to follow up on that point, and curious to hear Mpo staff perspective on whether or not, what the process would look like to consider adding someone with technical expertise in the context of accessibility, and if that's been pursued at all, if it could be pursued in the future. If not in this, we're probably not prepared to introduce an amendment to these bylaws in that capacity today, I don't think, but looking for a little information on background and what it would look like if something like that were to be introduced in the future. Any perspective? Thank you.
Sure. I mean, as of right now, and I mean, like we always have, we wholeheartedly trust our technical staff, Monroe County Highway Department engineers, City of Bloomington engineers, our mapping experts, our people from City of Bloomington Utilities, and we trust their decisions. I think that they come to the table with a vast array of knowledge to help this board as it relates to specifically transportation and traffic. And the Citizens Advisory Committee is always open for new members, and these members, I mean, on the CSE, I mean, which can be unlimited in number of members, can absolutely have somebody from the accessibility community, just like it has current members from the neighborhood association, and all sorts of the other roles as mentioned is this, in the CAC. I mean, this is merely just a suggested list of those who can be on the CAC, and we are certainly open to and hoping that more people will get involved. And this is absolutely the forum for someone with that background and information and knowledge. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I think you did. And I would need to honestly learn a lot more and hear more perspectives on both sides of that question to know whether I would think that someone with technical training and expertise in the accessibility community would be an appropriate fit for the TAC or not. Thank you for sharing staff's perspective on it. As a technical matter, just for my own understanding and possibilities for future amendments, if maybe not a practice we should get into regularly amending the bylaws, but if if the policy committee decided in the future that it wanted to add somebody from the accessibility community with technical expertise to the TAC, are there any restriction? Is that simply a choice of the policy committee? Are there any restrictions to that process as a technical matter?
This would have to be something that we would have to talk with the Federal Highway Association, the Federal Transit Authority, as well as INDOT, because as of right now, membership on the TAC is set to the current members as listed in the bylaws as they are.
Okay, so it's more complicated than the policy committee just deciding that wants to add somebody to the TAC?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just out of curiosity, Brian, or maybe Sarah, you can answer this. What's the average attendance at CAC meetings like?
Oh, about 9:10.
I
Yeah,
think we
so-
get upwards of about 13, 14 is the most that I've seen in a while.
So when the CAC loses its vote, you may well be seeing more issues with making a quorum.
The TAC has a quorum of 9 members.
Okay. If there's anyone else, I'm willing to hear your motion then, Terry.
I move that the MPO Policy Committee adopt the bylaws as recommended by the Bylaws Committee.
Point of order. I think, or I wonder if the policy, if we should entertain an amendment along the vein of what the CAC recommended and vote on an amendment to remove the non-voting status of the CAC on the TAC, simply because that's what was the recommendation of the Citizens Advisory Committee. So if we should hear that motion before or we should hear any motions, I guess, that would amend the bylaws prior to voting on the bylaws as a whole.
Well, would you like to propose that amendment then?
I guess we'd have to withdraw or table the motion from Ms. Porter at this point.
Fine, I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you.
So I move that the bylaws be amended to, and this is in the interest of process and giving a chance to for this body to speak its mind and have a vote on what the CAC recommended vis-a-vis these bylaws. So I move to remove the non-voting status of the CAC member on the TAC within the bylaws.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? I'll second it. Okay. Is there anyone to speak to the amendment? Seeing no one, I assume we need a roll call vote?
Yes, we do.
I'm sorry, I'll speak to it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, like I said, I wanted to bring that motion as a matter of process because I think what the CAC had a vote on and recommended to do with these bylaws we should hear and vote on. I won't be voting in favor of this motion. I support the bylaws as recommended by the Bylaws Working Group, and as drafted. I understand where Chair Reiterbrand is coming from and her perspective. I don't think that removing voting privileges from CAC on the Technical Advisory Committee will reduce the voice of citizens or their input. I think the real advantage of having a CAC member on the TAC is to do exactly what their responsibilities say, keep the TAC apprised of current and emerging citizen concerns. So I think the membership on that body is important to be a liaison for the CAC, but I do think that the technical nature of the committee and its recommendations should be limited to folks with technical expertise. That's not to say that members of the public can't have technical expertise. They certainly can. But whereas all of the other members of the TAC are guaranteed to have technical expertise sort of per their professional positions that lead to their appointment. It is not guaranteed that a Citizens Advisory Committee appointment would necessarily have technical expertise, even though, of course, they could. So for that reason, I support the bylaws as drafted, but again, I wanted to introduce this motion to amend in line with the CAC's recommendations. I just wanted to explain my reasoning and justification for my vote. Thank you.
If I may reiterate that there is more citizen input and commenting in all MPO committees. So there will be much more opportunities for citizens within or who attend TAC meetings to comment if they so wish.
Okay, so I'm ready for a roll call vote, I assume?
Can we get a
voice vote?
May we get a repeat of the motion so I know what a yes and what a no means?
Yes, the motion was to amend the bylaws in order to remove the non-voting status of the Citizens Advisory Committee appointment to the Technical Advisory Committee. In other words, to reinstate voting privileges for the CAC on the TAC. So a vote in favor of that amendment would reinstate those privileges and remove the words non-voting from the bylaws. A vote in favor would do that.
Okay, thank you. I guess I will go through the roll. Porter?
No.
Samples?
Oh, no.
Flaherty?
No.
Bannock?
No.
Nickel?
No.
Wallman?
No.
McDaniel?
No.
Ryderband?
Yes.
I have a 1 to 7.
Okay, so it takes us to the bylaw vote itself.
Motion to approve the bylaws as drafted.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, and no one from the public. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? No. Okay, moving on to new business. The UPWP.
Okay, if I can get the mouse to work. The Unified Planning Work Program is our contract with the Indiana Department of Transportation, the Federal Highway Administration, and the Federal Transit Administration. We prepare a 2-year work program. This is a requirement for the agencies. The Unified Work Program specifies what the MPO staff will accomplish with its partner agencies and committees over the coming fiscal year. Every year, the Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration issue what they call planning emphasis areas. The planning emphasis areas are what I would call the core activities that they expect us to produce or achieve in a given coming fiscal year under the budget resources that they allow us. This year's planning emphasis areas for coming fiscal year 2021 is it's different, I'll say that. First one is updating the Indiana Department of Transportation's Planning Roles and Responsibilities Cooperating Operating Manual. This is called a PERCOM. I've got 46 years experience and I've never heard of this before, but it's a requirement. And we advised the Department of Transportation, FTA, and the Federal Highway Administration that we would assist INDOT in updating this operating manual. Second, planning emphasis area is traffic incident management. Federal Highway is encouraging the MPOs to consider traffic incident management activities. This is not what I would call a normal role for an MPO. We've placed in the work program the language under, it's under work element 202. We've placed language in there that we will agree to work with state police and other first responders about after accident incidents, facilitate working groups activities and foster relationships, and possibly fund intelligent transportation system projects, and assist with compiling performance data for measures. Next item is local road safety plans. Federal Highway Administration is asking us to look more closely at local roadway safety plans, particularly those crash types involving roadway departure, intersections, bicycle, pedestrian, et cetera, road conditions. In other words, unusual situations is what they're looking at doing. This is more of what I would call in the realm of what we do on a constant basis. And then finally, the final planning emphasis area is public participation plans. They're asking us to update our public participation plan, and that is something we had already intended to complete. Once we finish the adoption of the bylaws, we would update the public participation plan, then our Title VI plan. So we look to achieve the public participation plan adoption sometime by September of this year, of this calendar year. Now, the budget set forth for us in this coming year totals $353,631, $282,905 federal, and then $70,726 local. The local comes predominantly from the city of Bloomington as being the host for the Mpo staff. Some of that also would come from contract service agreements with City of Bloomington, Monroe County Highway Department, Town of Ellettsville, and also Bloomington Transit. So we're looking at a total two-year budget of $707,000. This is up a modest amount over previous years. I think it's about $3,000 total up from the current year. And with that, we set forth here in a number of tables what tasks we seek to accomplish, what the priorities are. Administration public participation. Under administration public participation, the staff assembles 30 meeting packets per year, minimum, sometimes more. Data collection and analysis. This is our crash data. This is our traffic volume program, a number of other things in similar nature. Short-range planning and management. This is looking at how the system itself is performing, including bicycle, pedestrian, and traffic. Long-range planning is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which we previously talked about. Transit and active transportation. This is transit ridership, onboard survey type of information required for the Federal Transit Administration. And then active transportation is the bicycle pedestrian activity that we would be performing. And then other planning initiatives and special projects. This would be the Title VI update and also public participation plan update. So, and then the devil is in the details here. If any of you have proceeded through the 70 some odd pages, we tell exactly what we are to accomplish, and then we show in bullet point form when we are to accomplishment, what quarter of what fiscal year, or whether it's an ongoing process or anything like that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions from the committee?
Prior to a vote, the one thing that I would ask, and this came up just this morning, the Indiana Department of Transportation asked that, what we normally do is we ask the Policy Committee, Citizens Advisory Committee, the Technical Advisory Committee, and the Policy Committee to allow the staff to submit a draft document for review by the Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation has given us what I would call a compressed timeline. So they've asked that the committee, policy committee, grant the staff the opportunity to submit the documentation in final form pending comments from the Indiana Department of Transportation. What this does is it cuts a month off of the process. This is unusual, but it's because of the external events going on in the United States and the world. That's the reason for the request.
So you'll be asking for approval from the policy committee to submit the final form pending any comments, is that correct?
Yes, the document you have before you is what I would call a 99.9% draft. There are some name changes that are in here that I received this morning. And then there are attachments that we have to include in here, such as our agreements with Bloomington Transit. Let me get down here. I'm sorry. Yeah, agreements with Bloomington Transit that we have in here. Well, gosh, this is way too long. Our planning emphasis areas letter, cost allocation plan approval letter, which we've already received from the Department of Transportation. We received that in February, setting forth our direct, indirect, and allocated rates. And then planning area maps already in there, planning emphasis areas we need to add. I mean, there are a few little things that are missing from the document at the very end of the document. Other than that, like I said, it's a 99.9% pure document.
Yes, Ken.
Can I ask for clarification, Pat? I believe the term you used was we submit this as a final document pending NDOT comments.
Correct.
Okay. Now, does that mean they attach comments or do they amend it and edit it?
NDOT will send us review comments Monday morning, and those comments would have to do with typographical errors, maybe. I didn't see any, but there were name changes on names of Federal Highway and Federal Transit representatives that have changed. The budget will not change. We're using every penny that was allocated to us. We're leaving nothing on the table in terms of the budget. So I don't know what the comments are going to be, but typically in a review, they don't give you 100% pure document. Anytime you submit something, they have to find something, is what I want to say. Yeah.
Do I hear a motion then to approve the fiscal year 2021-2022 draft as our final draft pending any comments on the final document actually submitted by staff?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any comment? Anyone from the public wish to speak to this? Seeing none, we're back to the committee. All those in favor of the approval of the UPWP for 2021-2022, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. You're welcome. How about our tip amendments?
We have 3 Transportation Improvement Program, 2020 to 2024 Transportation Improvement Program amendments requested by the Department of Transportation. First one is on Interstate 69. This is a new project. It's the installation of new cable rail safety barriers along Interstate 69 from the State Road 445 exit to State Road 37, which is exit 114, all in Monroe County. Project cost here is, well, it's identified as an STP Surface Transportation Block Grant funding, but it uses an interstate facility match, which is 90/10. So we have $900,000 in federal funding, $100,000 in state match, a total of $1 million. Second project is State Road 46 signals, that's plural, modernization at State Road 446 in Monroe County. This would be accomplished, installed in fiscal year 2021, again using Surface Transportation Block Grants Federal funding amount, $1.160 million, matching $290,000, total of $1.45 million. Last project is a discretionary award to Monroe County. This is for the replacement of a bridge number 308 along Rockport Road, 4/100 of a mile south of Bowling Lane. I didn't even know this bridge existed. In fact, we had to check with the Department of Transportation, make sure it was actually within the urbanized area, and it is. This one has a sufficiency rating of 48.7, which is poor. And then with this discretionary award, preliminary engineering began in fiscal year 2021, cost of $390,000, right-of-way acquisition 2024, total cost $150,000, construction engineering and construction in 2025, cost of $420,000 and $1.656 million respectively, total cost of $2.6 million. Now, on this, well, at the very end, pardon me while I scroll down, I'm trying to show you what it looked like. The replacement structure has not been designed yet. The existing structure is on a skew over the bridge, and it's experiencing extreme scouring under the piers. The new structure would be placed on an alignment, a different alignment over the stream, so it would have a 90-degree crossing of the stream, and therefore it would require some roadway relocation. Yep. Oh, there we go. Yeah. God. Yeah. Okay. The map gives you an idea of where the area is, and as you can see, it's fairly rural, but it still lies within the urbanized area boundaries. Questions, please?
Any questions from the committee? I do have one, and that's either you can tell me or someone else might know. Why does it take 3 years from preliminary engineering to get right-of-way and then the actual engineering and construction?
Well, I'll let Chris ask because he's the real engineer. Yeah.
Typically, if we need additional right-of-way, we're using federal funds, we've got to get all of our environmental documentation taken care of. So we got to go through the NEPA process. That, depending on the site, depending on the resources impacted, that can take several months up to a year to get to the NEPA phase. And then in the right-of-way phase, there's a lot of regulation and process we have to follow to make sure that we're following the Uniform Act so that we're acquiring additional right-of-way the right way. So that adds up. Getting the three big time constraints usually on the development side are procuring your consultant. That can take some time. The NEPA phase, and then right-of-way.
So that generally will take about 3 years?
Yeah, and that process can take anywhere from 3 to 5 years, depending on the site and what impacts you have.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, do I hear a motion to approve the TIP amendments?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any comment? Seeing none. All those in favor of the TIP amendments, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Are there any communications from committee members on non-agenda items? Any topics for future agendas? Okay, upcoming meetings. Policy Committee may meet on April the 3rd at 1:30. The Technical Advisory Committee and Citizens Advisory Committee will not be meeting in person on March 25th, but may be meeting in cyberspace.
May I interject? The April 3rd meeting is, if it happens, it is moved up 1 week due to county and city holiday.
Correct. So, as I said, April 3rd may occur or may not, depending on what happens in the health world. Do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Done. Thank you.
Thank you.